Okay, I actually started this. So I should. We're live on YouTube. Okay, we're gone. All right. So here's the deal. We started last week going over how the RaMaD Valli understood Daniel's vision. And I'm going to share with you again the RaMaD Valli's text, and we're going to finish it. We're going to see the RaMaD Valli is only going to, he's not even going to finish the part of the vision that we saw. All right. He's only going to go through, so far we went through the first two beasts, okay, the four winds, which were, the four directions, and then we went through the first of the two beasts, the one that was like a lion and the one that was like the bear. And we're going to go through the other two beasts, and then the RaMaD Valli is going to say, the rest of this is a closed book. It's here. We have the text in front of us, but to understand the pnimiyut of it, to understand what it's really trying to tell us, we'll only understand at the end of days. So let's hear the end of what the RaMaD Valli has to say, and then I'm going to show you I'm creating a spreadsheet that goes through a number of the ways to understand this, not only this vision, but I'm starting off with putting in the RaMaD Valli stuff, and then I'm putting in all the different things that the Ramchal put into place, and so we'll see that in a little bit. Or the Maral, rather, not the Ramchal. Sorry about that. The Maral. Okay, so to get going, I need to share my screen so that I can see the text at the same time. Whoops, it's this one right here. Okay, so here it is. So we're actually at verse 6. Okay, we had verse 5 had spoken about the bear with the 3 bones or ribs, whatever, between its teeth, which RaMaD Valli tells us is because the bear, Paras and Medea, are driven by this need to consume. And they took over from Bavel, and the 3 bones referred to the 3 kings of Bavel and the treasures that they had amassed, and that everything came into the hands of the kings of Medea and Paras. And now, after the kings of Medea and Paras, comes the kingdom of Yavan, of Greece as a whole, okay, which is compared to the leopard. Because, so the initial part of it is what propelled Greece onto the world stage, similar to the fact that Nebuchadnezzar propelled Bavel onto the world stage. And one could say that Koresh, even more than Darius, that Koresh propelled Persia onto the world stage. So too, Alexander the Great propelled Greece onto the world stage. And then is going to come, the turn of the Romans after that. But this is very much a vision of history that sees history as being driven by pivotal figures. And so the pivotal figure here is what he's called in our literature is Alexandros Mokdon, for Macedonian, Alexander the Macedonian, rather than Alexander the Great. And he was bold like a leopard. So it's very interesting, right? We have a mission that says that one should be eis k'nemer, right? To get up early in the morning to do God's will, be eis k'nemer, to have the boldness of a leopard. And so RaMaD Valli is saying that that particular good quality is represented by Alexander. And there's something else that's like a very good quality, or at least a miraculous thing that happened for Alexander, similar to what happened for Am Yisrael. And that is that he conquered almost all of the kingdoms of the world. He started off from, I'm going to show you a map for those of you who care. He started off in Macedonia, which is just the northeastern part of the Greek peninsula. And from there, he went on to conquer the rest of the Greek peninsula. He went east and conquered most of the Persian Empire, getting into northern India. He went south, around the rim of the Mediterranean, and he conquered not only where Eretz Yisrael is, but he also conquered Egypt and much of North Africa. And he went west and he conquered, there wasn't a lot going on there yet at that point. Rome wasn't Rome yet, but the Etruscans, etc. So he went in all the four directions, and we're going to hear about that in a moment. So he conquered almost all the kingdoms of the world with a relatively small army that he took with him from place to place. And the ma'atim nitzchu et merubim, like we say in, just one second, I want to make sure that I quote it properly. Those of you who know me know I have this issue with quoting, even things that I say on a frequent basis. But, we talk about in the days of Mattatyahu ben Yochanan, right, in benching and in the modim of Shmona Esrei, and we talk about Al HaNisim, and what's one of the Nisim? One of the Nisim is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Masarta Giborim Biyad Chalashim, that you handed over the strong into the hand of the weak, V'rabim Biyad Ma'atim, and the many into the hands of the few. And that's what RaMaD Valli is telling us, is that the Ma'atim were able to conquer the Merubim, the many, but that's not talking about us. That's talking about Alexander the Great. Later, at the end of the Greek rule over Eretz Yisrael, in the time of the Maccabees, it's a full. We're the ones who are the few, and they're the ones who are the many. So he doesn't explicitly reference that, but that would be an explanation. The combination of these two is sort of is part of the explanation as to why the Maharal chooses to talk about Daniel's dream and also about Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and finds these parallels in this whole structure of the universe. And in his book on that is explicitly about Hanukkah. So there's a hint at that here. And RaMaD Valli goes on and he says, but why did that happen? Like why you would expect that the many could conquer the few. And so when it doesn't work that way, you should see in that this is the hand of God. This is God's will. And so God wanted to give dominion, this universal dominion, to this particular klipa at this time. Each klipa gets its own time. Now, remember, klipa can be like a totally negative word, but klipa doesn't have to be. And think about what would happen if you had a body that didn't have skin. Okay. I mean, people who live with some kind of a skin disease and the skin is raw and open are subject to all kinds of infections. The skin is a barrier that protects that which is inside of it from that which is outside of it. Okay. And so klipa, and at the same time, it's somewhat permeable. It's not completely, I don't have that word highlighted, by the way, for a particular reason. It's just, I touched the screen, it did that, and I'm afraid to mess up with it or I end up with the whole thing blue or who knows what. So I'm leaving that one word highlighted. Let go. So, the skin is somewhat permeable. In addition to taking in oxygen through our lungs, which is the way that we take in the most oxygen, okay, and the oxygen that gets to the blood and the heart, etc., we also take in oxygen through our skin. And as a matter of fact, the outer layer of skin doesn't have any blood vessels to give those cells that are still alive oxygen. And they get their oxygen directly from the air. And furthermore, not only do we lose moisture through our breathing and through other organs of elimination, but the largest organ of elimination in the body is the skin, is this klipa that we have around us. So a klipa can be something which is very hard and impervious and doesn't let anything through. Or a klipa can be something which is very close to the thing that it's trying to protect, and it can be somewhat permeable. And it's sort of it's a membrane that lets some stuff through and some not. In the beginning, Chazal really looked at the klipa of Greece, of Yavan, as being fairly benign. The notion of Yavan as a descendant of Yafet, which is this language of Yofi, of beauty, who dwells in the tents of shame. And if there's that kind of symbiotic relationship between the two, it can work very well. What happened was, of course, that ultimately, because Greece, Yavan, had a strong drive for dominion, they weren't willing to take even a parallel place, much less a second place. The notion that they would be within the tents of shame rather than being in charge was anathema to them. And so eventually they become a klipa whose time has to run its course. But just calling them a klipa is not necessarily saying that they're bad or evil or something like that. And so the RaMaD Valli goes on, because what was the description again? Remember, the description was that Ba'atar Dana, after this, Chaza Chaviant, I saw this beast, or this living being, Va'aru, and behold, Achri Kanamar. It that backside, whatever, it appeared somehow like a leopard, like a So what do you think of when you think of a leopard? Clearly, Chazal thought of it as being something that was bold or brazen. We have all sorts of other things that we think of, right? About a leopard can't change its spots, and it's very graceful, and all these other things. And so Greece has those characteristics. In addition, the verse went on and it said, Valli, it has Gapin Arba Diuf al Gabad, had 4 birds' wings on its back. So it was like a namir, okay, because it went on all 4s. It wasn't on 2 legs like a human. Remember, the first beast, which started off like a lion, got lifted up and stood onto 2 legs. The second beast is the bear, which, unless you read it with Rashi, but is the bear, which has basically often stands up on the 2 legs. It's still somewhat humanoid in that sense. But now we have the namir, which is fully on 4 legs. And in addition, it has 4 wings. And he explains that this is because Alexander Mogdon was like a bird that flew in all 4 directions of the world. And that's what I was talking about. He conquered the whole known world in all 4 directions, starting there from Greece. In order to impose his control to the ends of the earth. That was his driving motivation, that he should have control over everything, that everything should be determined according to what he wanted. Not to destroy it, not to consume it, not even so much that they should give him covet or give him money or this and the other, just that he could be in control. This is the driving motivation of this leopard, okay? And when it writes that in addition that this beast had 4 heads. So we have this body of the leopard on 4 legs, but that it has these 4 wings that take it anywhere it wants to go as quickly as it wants. And remember, Alexander only ruled for about less than 15 years and managed to conquer like a huge swath, and doing it at the speed that you could move, that the wind could move you on the sea, or that, mostly he was going with infantry, it wasn't only cavalry. So he was going with infantry. So it means as fast as people could walk. And they're, not with cars and not with trains and certainly not with airplanes and supersonic jets the difficulties that he had were amazing, that he did it in such a short period of time. But then in the end, it had 4 heads. Because when the kingdom ended up getting divided among 4 kings after his death. And if you go and you read the history, there was a period before it all settled out. But basically, there were the Seleucids who had control in this part of the world, in Mesopotamia, Lebanon, and Syria, etc. There was Antigonid, I think it was like maybe that was had control of Greece and the Balkans and the area to the west. There were the Ptolemies who had control in Egypt and northern Africa. And there was, I think it's the Assanids who had, I'm sure after somebody else's name, who had control of most of the rest of Persia and into northern India, etc. and Anatolia. So that would be the northern part of Turkey, etc. So the kingdom, this empire that Alexander had crafted, lasted until his death, at which point, within a fairly short period of time, it broke apart into these 4 heads. All right. And each one took their part and they established their control of this klipa, which is Greece, until the time that was decreed for it. So RaMaD Valli is clearly seeing human history as being in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands. So I said I would also share. Let me click on new share. I was gonna share some maps and things like that. So let me take a look. If you care. And if you don't, I guess you're going to have to look at it anyway, because whoops, I thought I had a map and I've lost the map. Maybe not. Wow. I take it back. I didn't save the map. I saved all sorts of other things open, but I didn't save the map. So I guess you're not going to get to see the map. Okay. But I looked things up because it's been a while since I'd studied ancient history, but most of what I shared with you is very similar to what I remembered from when I was a kid. And the RaMaD Valli also pointed out one other thing, that that he started, right? Macedonia, Greece started basically this peninsula that stuck out into the sea and a bunch of little islands. And it was a loose confederation, and they were often warring between themselves. And then actually Alexander's father, unlike what RaMaD Valli says, Alexander's father, Philippus, does start the process of conquering and consolidating the Greek League, the Corinthian League, etc. But he is assassinated at the wedding of his daughter, and his son Alexander becomes the king in his place. And Alexander continues this, but takes it like presumably way beyond anything that Philippus would have thought of. But basically it's like mamish coming out of the sea. So that image that Daniel had of seeing each of these beasts coming out of the sea is certainly a true image for Bavel, in that once they take over Ashur, they also take over down to Egypt, etc. And so the Mediterranean and travel by sea is much faster than travel by land. And so there is this sense of all of a sudden the beast appears out of the sea. That certainly must have been how Paro felt about it. And in addition, while it's not so much true of Persian Media, which is much more landlocked and the Near East rather than what we call the Mid East, but it's very much true of Greece, like bursting forth from all these islands. It's this beast that comes out of the sea. And now we have verse 7, because there was just the one verse that basically dealt with Greece. And then we have verse 7. In the end comes the fourth kingdom. Now, if you remember correctly, actually, in the end came a person, and came Atik Yomin, and came and came the court, and then there was a person, and all of the beasts got judged, and the last beast got killed by the court, and the other beasts were continued in their existence for a while. And now all of a sudden, instead of beasts, there's a human. And if you take it back, so there were the four, but then there's the fifth, and the human doesn't come out of the sea. Okay, if you take it back, and we'll start doing some of the parallels back to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Nebuchadnezzar's dream, there was the head of gold, the arms and upper body of silver, the abdomen and thighs of bronze or of copper, and the legs of iron with the legs and toes of mixed iron and pottery. But then that's the four, like the four beasts, although it's four in the shape of a statue of a man. It's not a moving man. It's not a living man. Okay. But it has the appearance of man. And then there comes this stone. Okay, remember back to that dream from chapter 2, there comes this stone that hits this statue, which then shatters into smithereens, into dust, blows away. The rock becomes larger and larger, like a mountain, something which is eternal. Okay, that's this. So there's the four, which all of a sudden get wiped out, and then there's a fifth thing, which is different from the first four. And in that sense, actually, Daniel's vision has that same pattern to it. However, RaMaD Valli, as you'll see if I just pull up to here, RaMaD Valli says, okay, now I'm done. This is the last verse. Chapter 7, verse 7 is the last thing he's going to explain. He does talk about, and we did this back in Elul, he does talk about Daniel's prayer, which is such a powerful example of tefillah for us, and in very, translation of various phrases of it, mostly in translation of various phrases of it, we use that prayer in our tefillah until this day, and we learn certain aspects of how to daven. Well, we learn a lot of it from how Hannah davened. We also learn a lot of aspects of tefillah from Daniel, and we talked about that back in Elul before Rosh Hashanah. But the RaMaD Valli ends his Perush here in the middle of Daniel's vision. And so as far as he's concerned, this is the end, because this is the end that he's going to be willing to talk about. So in the end comes this fourth kingdom, which was the kingdom of the Roman Caesars, who were violent and strong and crueler than any other kingdom that had preceded them, because they come from the shorish, from the root of harsh judgment, and not just harsh judgment, but the feet of the klipa. So at that point, he's making a reference to a Kabbalistic concept, which is a little outside my pay grade. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But the feet can be, right, something that's habitual, or the feet can be that, right, the feet are that which take you from place to place. And so he explains this hint, with the following words from the actual pasuk. But Tardana, after this, in other words, after the third beast, which was Greece, which was Yavan, okay, Chaza Chavyan b'chazoi lelia, that the vision, I saw this vision of a beast in the visions of the night. Va'aru, and behold, Chayva Rivia, this fourth beast, Dechila ve'emtani, and it was fearsome and awesome, utkifa yatera, and extremely tokpani, extremely like aggressive. Okay, ushnin di barzel, and it had teeth of iron, many great teeth of iron. All of this hints at this notion of the din hakasheh, right? That's what he says, is that the Roman Caesars were from this rule of law. So the rule of law without mercy, we know it doesn't work. It doesn't work even when it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rule of law. Okay, when he created the world and it was only created b'din, it broke apart time after time until finally it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that to create a world that could continue to exist, it had to be a world that was a mixture of din and rachamim. Okay. But the klipa is just the din. Okay, it's just that outer shell of law, and without heart, with the question of is law and justice the same thing, right? And so that's part of what's being talked about here. Law without intelligence, without nuance, okay, is one of the cruelest forces known to us. And I think we're still seeing it. We see it, anyway, I think we still see it today. And so we haven't finished off with this klipa of the din kasher yet. And because of its cruelty, what does it do with those teeth? So it eats things and it grinds at them. And the stuff that falls out, anything that's like left over, shahra, baragla rasa, it treads it underfoot to destroy it completely. Like, really, if you aren't eating it, if you're not getting benefit from it, what difference does it make? Why do you have to destroy things completely? Okay, Hilo like that, right? It couldn't allow any remnants of anything that it had conquered to exist. Everything has to be like Rome, right? It wasn't enough to conquer. Roman peace wasn't, we'll conquer you, we'll give you roads, we'll give you bathhouses, we'll give you a legal system, but you can continue with your own culture. Roman rule was you become Roman, except that we aren't going to really count you as Roman in most cases, but you have to become Roman, and we have to utterly destroy anything else. And again, I think, that we're seeing that same great desire. If you don't think like I do, I'm going to erase your culture. I'm going to erase everything that you've done. If you didn't do it the way I think you should have done it, it's gone. We're still having the same problem with the same fearsome beast. We're still having it today. Okay. And clearly it was still in the time of the RaMaD Valli himself. there were still problems with it. And so he gets to this point and he says, Valenamar, right? So it with its cruelty, it just simply wants to wipe everything else. And about this fourth beast, it says, Asher. It says, and this is actually a pasuk from, this is a pasuk from, oh, you know what? I bet I haven't shared. Right. I'm actually sharing the pasuk, so let me go look at it. Okay. All right. That's where I am, because I've actually been sharing. I'm so confused. But I don't want this line. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the line I want to share. Okay. I think I'm sharing the correct place with you, but the entire verse is Goy az panim asher lo yisa panim lezaken v'na'ar lo yachon. There's going to be a nation. This is part of not the tochacha that we just heard last week. The Chazal interpret the tochacha in Bechukotai as referring to the Chorban with Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. The Chorban of Bayit Rishon, and the Tochacha in Kitavo, I think it's in Kitavo, right? In Sefer Devarim, is referring to Chorban Bayit Sheni. And one of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu warns Am Yisrael of is that there's going to be this nation who's brazen-faced, who won't Lo yisa panim lezaken, won't give any credence to the elder, v'na'ar lo yachon, and won't give any mercy to the youth. There are all sorts of lovely and not so lovely, like difficult, perushim on that. But now this is what I was supposed to have done before. So let me go back, because I get to see what I'm looking at and y'all don't necessarily get to see it. So here we go. This is what I said. Here we are. I was looking at this even though I hadn't reshared it, but now I'm hoping that this is what you're seeing is the end of RaMaD Valli. And so about this fourth beast and about it says, and this is, and he just quotes the last half of the pasuk. This is that goy is panim, which doesn't give precedence or lo yisa panim, right? What does it mean, l'seit panim, to honor somebody? They don't honor the elder, and they don't have mercy on the youth. And this is very different, he says, from all of the kingdoms that had preceded it, because even Bavel and Persian Media and Greece they didn't behave with this level of cruelty to try to destroy everything. They would conquer and they would leave things in place. Now, Ashur, which came before Bavel, but didn't manage to throw us out of our land completely, did destroy the northern kingdom. But Ashur was a little different in that they did this population transfer thing. And in part, that was an attempt to destroy the culture, or at least to destroy. But again, it wasn't for the sake of destruction. It was for the sake of trying to prevent the people of any given background from having a large enough mass together that they could revolt. If you split them up, right, it was a divide and conquer strategy. It was not a wipe them out strategy. Okay. Whereas he felt that this beast that represents Rome and the Romans themselves had a wipe them out strategy. So he said, and now he says, until here, I've understood the perush of the matter of this dream, but the rest of the dream, okay, the appearance of Atik Yomin and his court and the man and all the rest of it, and the other visions that Daniel will have in chapter 8 and then in chapters 10 through 14 till the end of the book, we'll have to wait, he says, to explain them as it will be, as the Spirit will enlighten us from on high in Yirtzeh Hashem. Because to every time and season and to every matter under the sky, right, and everything has its own time and place. And what he's telling us is that as far as he was concerned, it was not yet the time and place to try to understand the rest of Sefer Daniel. And he points out something that's very important for all of us to remember, which is called dochek et hasha'ah dochakto. Anybody who pushes the time essentially pushes him away, right? The parable is often made with a woman who's getting ready to give birth. And if she starts to push too early, then what ends up happening is that instead of the baby coming out, the baby's head pushes against the opening and bruises it so that it swells up and shuts more tightly because of the swelling. So you have to be careful not to push, because the pushing can actually delay things even more. And so he goes on and he says, and that's certainly true in terms of the reality of things, that we're not supposed to explain them just based on whatever comes into your heart to explain. Like, that's not the truth of the matter. The truth is singular. There's only one truth. It's not, oh, I can explain it this way and you can explain it that way. And he believes in an absolute truth. Now, truth at different levels, yes. But, to understand how Daniel's dream plays out in terms of timing and in terms of history, what he's saying is, I don't know how the rest of that's going to play out. I don't know what's going on. And he doesn't even want to explain the business of there were 10 horns and 3 of them fall off and then another horn grows. And it is that other horn like a separate beast of itself? Is it yet like 4.5? Like, he doesn't want to go there at all. And so he doesn't. Okay. Because he doesn't want to try to say something. And then it turns out that, in fact, that's not the way Kadosh Baruch Hu decided to make it play out. Like, he would just be guessing. And just because it appears to him that's a good guess, that's not the same as having a deep panimi kind of knowing. And so he says, we're not doing that. And anybody who wants to explain it according to his own opinion about these closed off matters about this book is actually making a big mistake. And he's v'hinchil sheker v'kazav l'samchim al perusho, and he's just bequeathing lies and deceits to those who are relying on his perush. And so if that's the case, nishtok, we're going to be silent from here, v'nikabel schar al shtika, and receive the reward for the silence rather than making stuff up. And so that's the end of what RaMaD Valli has to offer us. Okay, so I'm going to stop this share. All right, so I have about 15 minutes left. So I think I'm going to show you what I was getting started on. And hopefully I'll have it more finished by next time. Not there. Okay, fine. This, whoa. Not that. This. Okay. There we go. All right. So, right. Let me share with you what I'm doing. And then anybody who wants this can contact me at my email at any time, including people who see this years later. If you want it, you're welcome to. And I will share this spreadsheet with you once I get it finished. So I'm putting the source along the left-hand side, and I've got the 1, 2, 3, and 4. But as I said, there's really a fifth thing, okay? But so I really kind of need a fifth column. Like the fifth thing in the dream, right? Daniel chapter 7 is so there are these first four. There's the body of the lion that has wings of eagle, face and legs of a person, the heart or mind of man also. The second one was like a bear. Rashi said a wolf with the 3 bones between the teeth. The third one was like a leopard, the 4 wings of a bird on its back and the 4 heads. And the fourth one was the most fearsome, teeth of iron, different from all other animals, with 10 horns, grinds the remnants underfoot. I didn't continue, but really with that fourth one, it goes on. Like I said, there almost is that the fifth thing, right? 3 of the horns fall off, another horn grows in its place. This other horn has eyes and a mouth and starts talking. And what's that all about? Okay. And then in any event, there's a fifth thing. Okay. Whether that's still part, whether that's 4A and 4B, or whether that's a fifth. And then in Daniel's vision, there's a sixth thing, but right there eventually comes this person who is given dominion. Dominion is given to each of these 4 animals representing the 4 kingdoms. And then eventually it's given to the man who is Mashiach Tzidkenu. But RaMaD Valli, so then I'm bringing you in the next one, I'm bringing a little bit from the RaMaD Valli that the first beast represents Bavel. Nebuchadnezzar and Bavel, the driving motivation is honor and dignity. And there are references in the imagery back to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Okay. That he sees himself as a man, that the lion, he sees himself, he sees the whole thing, himself and the following kingdoms in the shape of a man. So the fact that this lion, which represents the costume, which represents Bavel, is stood up like a man, is given the face of a man, and eventually is given the heart of a man. And it also not only represents that dream of Nebuchadnezzar, it actually references back to the fact that Nebuchadnezzar had his human faculties taken away from him, okay, for 7 years. And then the human faculties were returned to him so that he could really recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, right? The bear figure, the second one, was Persia Media. The driving motivation is consumption, right? Eating. And the 3 bones refer to the treasure that was amassed by the 3 Babylonian kings. The third one, the leopard, was Greece. Alexander is bold. He covered all 4 directions of the world. The driving motivation is power and dominion. And the 4 heads refer to the split up of his empire into 4 dominions. And the fourth beast, according to the RaMaD Valli, is Rome. The driving motivation is destruction and cruelty. And I didn't get anything more written because that's pretty much where he stops. Okay. He does say to us which I guess I will add to it right now, but I'm going to put it in parentheses because I don't know exactly what it is, right? Its root is in the klipa of harsh judgment. Okay, but right, and in the foot, that's what the foot crushing everything underneath is from. And now I'm starting. So that's the part of the dream that we've gone over, and we went over it with RaMaD Valli. And now I am starting to create the rest of the spreadsheet that I'm starting to create. I can show you actually. So the deal is that that I actually had, well, you're not going to be able to see it until I stop sharing this thing. So let's stop the share and then see if I can hold it up in such a way you can actually see this. Good question. Okay, I created, sun is shining on it in a weird way. Anyway, I've created a handwritten sheet, which I'm now trying to create the spreadsheet from. And a lot of this is based off the Maharal. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk through this chapter using the Maharal. And then at some point, we're going to actually read the last half of the chapter and at least translate the last half of the chapter. Because what happens is that just like we don't understand what all this imagery is talking about without Perushim from Chazal, Daniel didn't understand the imagery either. And in this sense, he's like a true prophet, that the prophets sometimes didn't understand the imagery that they were shown. I mean, the greater prophets, Yirmiyahu and some of the others, were given a vision of something, and then essentially Kadosh Baruch Hu said to them, "And what did you see?" And he described it, and then he said, Kadosh Baruch Hu said to the Navi, "And what does that mean?" And the Navi would give an explanation, what he thought it meant. And Kadosh Baruch Hu was like, "You got it. You got the whole message. Not only did you got the message I was trying to give you, and the vision, the visual that came out was how you interpreted that message." And that's your creativity, taking the message of Kadosh Baruch Hu and putting it into terms that relate to you, but then you can not only explain the vision, describe the vision to somebody else, paint it if you're a painter, right? Make a poem of it if you're a poet. But not only are you able to do that, but you're also able to explain to them what's going on. So there were others of the Nevi'im who were not on that level. And they would be given a vision and they would be like, "That's pretty scary. I'm not quite sure what this all means." And so then it would talk about, right, Hamalach hadover bi, the angel that speaks within me, would have to explain it to them. They would have to get a verbal, that the message came to them, but they had to not only the message itself somehow created a vision for them, but they also, because of the level that they were on, required their own vision to be explained to them. And Daniel is on this level. So he has this vision, and he's going to say that in the last part of it, he's going to say, he goes over to one of the angels that he sees, who's part of Atik Yomin's court, and he asks for an explanation of what he has seen. And he's given this explanation. And in fact, in the rest of the Sefer, which we're not going to do, because I tend to agree with RaMaD Valli that it just, I can read the words to you and I have no clue what they actually reference. And I can read you, Rav Sajid Gaon's Perush and the Malbim's Perush and Rashi's Perush and Ibn Ezra's Perush, and they all disagree with each other, okay? Because this one sees it as applying to history, but they lived at different time periods. And so each one, and not just different time periods, but also different places. And so if you live like Ibn Ezra in a place, right, the Spanish where the Catholics and the Muslims are fighting, you have one sense of how it should, of how to interpret what's going on in Islam, and the place of Islam becomes important to you to put into Daniel's story. And if you're living like Rashi in France, or you're living in Ashkenaz, and you're in a place where you have very little to do with either the Huns or the Muslims or anything else, then you're like, it's still Rome, and there's no need to bring in anything else. So it has to be understood that a lot, and he uses numbers, and people try to predict using the numbers, and some of the predictions in terms of time came and went a long time ago. The Mashiach's not here yet. And some of them are talking in terms of hundreds of thousands of years, and I'm like, it's been hard enough to deal with the last 2,000 years. You're seriously expecting me to wait that long? I think I like the other ones better just because they give me a little more, like hope that I'm going to see the end of it, right? But really and truly, I think the angel basically says to Daniel, and that's what RaMaD Valli is quoting, that it's chatum v'satum. You should write it down, he says to Daniel. But to understand it, you're not going to understand it. I mean, I can give you some, but you're not going to understand what I'm saying to you. Okay? You're not going to understand it until it comes to pass, and it's not going to come to pass for a while yet. But you want me to tell you exact number of words? No. Exact number of years? That's not happening. So anyway, so that's the end. So I'm going to call it quits here for today. And hopefully I will have more of that spreadsheet ready and available for next time. And we'll go back over what the Maharal had said about, not only about Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but also these other parallels that he brought to all sorts of things in Chumash, and also to this last vision of Daniel. And he also sees it, I mean, everybody sees it as the progression of the four kingdoms, because that's how the angel explains it to Daniel. And that's how Daniel was taught by Hashem to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's first dream also. And the two are very connected. So they kind of bookend the accessible part of Sefer Daniel. And then, so it's going to take a while. And the last thing I have to say is that next week, Baruch Hashem, I have a wedding to go to. And so I'm not teaching at the regular time. I may record a lesson at a different time. If there's anybody who wants to come to it live and can tell me what would be a good time for them, I would be happy to consider that. Otherwise, I will continue recording these lessons until we finish with chapter 7. And that will be the end, both of the Aramaic section, and that will be the end of these classes on Sefer Daniel. Have a good week.